Hello fellow Earthlings, it's Libs, and today I'm going to be doing my winter reading wrap-up. Ugh. I need a drink. Bourbon. Okay, so I've been doing these seasonal quarterly wrap-ups for quite a while now. I just think they're a good way to track what I've been reading, look at if I want to change the kind of books I'm reading, if there's something I feel like I'm missing out on, I can just kind of do a check-in. So I've got my trusty story graph in front of me to let me know what's been going on, because I do not remember things without it. So I have read 36 books this year and 12,125 pages so far. The books I've been reading the most are still reflective, emotional, adventurous and challenging books, which is not a surprise. Been reading mostly medium-paced books and just books under 500 pages. 22% of the books I've been reading are non-fiction. I would like to read a bit more fiction. Non-fiction, I think my aim is kind of to make it like a quarter of the books I read this year. So I'm going to make sure I read a few more soon. My most popular genres have been fantasy, classics, literary and historical books. My most read authors are Audre Lorde, Erin Morgenstern, Ali Smith and Taylor Jenkins Reid. In June I read... Oh no, that's pages. In June I read 5 books, in July I read 4 books, and in August I had my best reading month of the year so far with 6 books. And my average star rating for the year is 3.81 stars. So the first book I read in winter was ironically Autumn by Ali Smith. I thought I read this in autumn, apparently I was way off. This is the first book in her seasonal quartet. That dog is outside of its house.
5 minutes later.
Okay, we're all good now. I've returned the neighbour's dog to the neighbour. She was very sweet. So Autumn. A book that I can't really explain. It's kind of about Brexit and art history and just so many different things. It's amazing. I'd recommend reading it yourself because I can't really explain it very well. I gave it 4.5 stars. It's a really, really cool book and I would recommend it. Next I read The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi. Oh, it's been a while. I don't remember how you pronounce her surname. I read her second poetry collection. It was okay. I think I liked her longer poems as opposed to her short poems that seem more like pretty statements rather than poetry to me. So I thought it was okay. I gave it 3 stars. I think I liked Milk and Honey when it came out a lot, but this one just didn't do the same thing for me. Then I read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. We know what this book is about. Everyone on BookTube and apparently on BookTok have been talking about this for ages. It's fantastic. It's about this movie star who is doing an interview now that she's in her 70s, talking about all her husbands and all the rumours that were going on about her when she was making films. And it's very, very cool, very interesting. It is told in like an interview format mainly. It's not quite as like with Daisy Jones and the Six, it's a lot more interview focused. This one definitely has that, but there's bits of story around it, and you get to learn more about the interviewer and things like that. It was very cool. I gave it 4.5 stars. Then I read Orlando by Virginia Woolf. This was my first Virginia Woolf novel, and it was okay. I think in some ways it was very progressive, and then in other ways it wasn't. And it just was kind of okay. The writing is beautiful, but it was a weird story that I couldn't really tell where in time we were meant to be for a lot of it. So I thought it was interesting, but if you're like me and you haven't read Virginia Woolf before, I'm going to assume this isn't the one to start with. I gave it 3 stars. Now we have some books from a video I did reading thrillers for the first time. I will try very hard to remember to link that up here somewhere. I read When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. This is the story that's it's mainly focused on taking gentrification to the extreme in this neighborhood in New York. I thought it was pretty good. I really liked the idea of it, but I think in the execution wasn't quite there for me. I think it could have been amazing, but I think it just, I don't know how to explain it. I probably did a better job in the other video because it's been a while since I read this. Really loved the concept. I thought the writing was solid. I do think having 2 protagonists may have not quite worked in this scenario, because when you've got one character doubting the other protagonist but you're reading from both perspectives, it didn't quite work for me, because you kind of already know if you can or can't trust someone when you're reading from their perspective. And I gave that 3 stars. Then I read There Was Still Love by Fayval Perret. I'm trying to remember this book. I don't really know how to explain it. It's kind of a historical fiction. Most of it is based in Prague in, I want to say, the 80s. It's kind of exploring this family. One of the daughters in this family in like the 30s had to leave Prague and the other one didn't, and it's kind of how that has influenced their families further on. There was a lot I liked about this. It's very short, and I do like short books, but I think in this instance I would have liked it to be a little bit longer. Apparently it was only 210 pages, and I just think a bit more could have been explored than it was, because the main point of view characters are children, and so you don't know what they don't know, and so it would have been nice to have a bit more context for the things that are happening, because I don't know as much as I probably should about this period in history in Prague, and I would have loved to know more, and I think this book could have been great at explaining it, but it didn't really. It did a little bit, but not as much as I think it could have to give proper context to everything. Haha. And then I read The Last by Hannah Jameson. I did not enjoy this book at all. Did not enjoy this book. This is a dystopian end of the world story. This guy is at a hotel in Switzerland. Nuclear bombs have gone off pretty much everywhere. They seem to think they're the only 20 people left alive in this hotel, even though they've got no reason to think that, but that's what they think. And it's this guy who really sucks trying to figure out this murder that may or may not have happened before the bombs went off, and then trying to figure out how their little mini society is going to function. and trying to have commentary on a lot of issues, or not really exploring the issues in any real depth, and it just, I don't know, the story fell flat. I couldn't stand our main character. It just didn't quite work for me. The murder mystery aspect is like there for a bit and then kind of just tossed away, like it doesn't matter. And I just wasn't really on board with it. Then I read A Lullaby by Liani Slimani, translated by Sam Taylor, I think. This is a fantastic little thriller book about this nanny in France who murders the children. And you know straight away, like it's on the cover, it's the first like few sentences of the book, you know that the nanny murdered the children. And then it goes back in time to show the family hiring this nanny, showing you how great this nanny is at the start, and then deconstructing this nanny and like her life and figuring out how she got to a point where she could just murder the children. And I thought it was brilliant. It was really well done. It's quite a slow-paced book, but I really, really enjoyed it, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Then I read Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. I really enjoyed this, which shouldn't be a surprise. I think just universally, we all kind of collectively enjoy Percy Jackson. I wanted to read all the books before the series comes out. I don't know when the series is coming out, but I thought I'd get on and read the books now. I gave this 4 stars. I thought it was a great, charming story. I thought it was really fun, really quick. I enjoyed the audiobook. Not a lot to say about it really, I just enjoyed it. And I think if you've been considering reading it as an adult, because you missed out on reading it when you were a kid, I think it's great, would recommend. Then I read Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Listen to the audiobook if you can, because the audiobook for this was fantastic. Again, I feel like it's one most people will have heard of, but it's essentially this person interviewing all the members of this band that was really big in like the late 60s, early 70s, and trying to figure out why the band broke up. And so you've got kind of all these different points of view from different characters who were in this band. It's really, really interesting, and I loved it. I love that kind of music from the 70s, so I was super into this book. I love the fact that Judy Greer was voicing one of the characters. It made me very happy. I gave it 5 stars. I loved it. Again, it's a book that I don't think I probably would have picked up if it wasn't for a free audiobook at my library to borrow, but I'm so glad I read it, and I have to start trusting people when they give books a lot of hype, because I've been doing really well with the hype train this year. After that, I read Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. I read the version that was adapted for young adults, so I can't really judge what the one for adults would be like. This is the book that inspired the film that came out a year or 2 ago. I'd also recommend the film, but I think the book is better and gives you a greater understanding of everything that's going on. Brian Stevenson is a lawyer who, at least in the 90s, was working in Alabama getting inmates off death row and exploring a lot of like the statistics around the prison system there. And it's a fantastic read. I definitely recommend it to anyone who wants to know anything about that at all. Even if you don't think you're interested, read this book. It's fantastic. It's probably the best book I've read this year. I did listen to the audio book that he narrates, and it was brilliant. I learnt a lot. I would definitely say out of any book, that's the book to read. Then I read Winter by Ali Smith, which is the second book in the seasonal quartet. This was really good. It wasn't quite as good as Autumn, I don't think, so I gave it 4 stars. It still explores a lot of really interesting topics and things relevant to England and bits of English history that I knew nothing about. It's still really, really good. I just don't think it was quite as impactful as the previous book, but it's definitely still worth a read. I still can't really explain to you what it's about because it won't make sense. Then I read The Many by Will Menmuir. This is a kind of mysterious, thrillery little novel. It's mainly about grief and this small town in Cornwall. You're experiencing two different characters' perspectives. The town lost someone a decade before the story starts, and they're all still grieving for him, and someone moves into his house a decade later, experiencing their own grief, and it's kind of just looking at how this man interacts with the town, how the town interacts with him, and how no one is really prepared to actually just talk about their feelings. That's all they have to do, but they don't do that, and things get a bit messy. This is the only book I've ever given 2.75 stars to, because it wasn't quite a 3-star read, but I liked it more than my 2.5 stars, and I don't like having a book rated there, but I feel like I'm going to forget this book, and at the end of the year I want to rank all the books I've read, so I'm just going to leave it there for the sake of that. Then I read The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa and translated by Stephen Snyder. This is brilliant. I love this book. This is about a housekeeper and her young son who are taking care of this elderly professor who has a brain injury, and his memory only lasts for 80 minutes. So every day she has to reintroduce herself to him because he doesn't remember who she is. And a lot of it is about the relationship this professor, this maths professor, develops with her son. And even though he can't remember the son, he just adores children so much, and you just watch this very special bond they have unfold. And it was so beautiful. I really, really love this book. It's quite simple writing, and the first half is quite slow. So if you can get past all the math in the first bit, it's a beautiful story, and I would really, really recommend it. And the final book I read in winter was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This is a book I attempted reading a few years ago, but it's a very long book, and I put it down and then forgot to pick it up again. So this time I listened to the audiobook. The audiobook is great. I would recommend that if you're like me and not a fan of reading really big books. The Night Circus is about this competition between two illusionists, and they don't know who they're competing against. Their instructors decided on this challenge, and the Night Circus is where they are competing with each other. It's this magical circus where impossible things can happen. It's a very whimsical, magical story. It kind of gives me, like, if you want a book where you can be immersed in this magical world that you just wish you could go to so much, then this is a great book, and I definitely recommend it for that. It's more about the atmosphere than the plot, but the plot is still pretty solid. I liked the ending. I liked this book a lot more than I liked The Starless Sea. I think I liked the plot of The Starless Sea a lot more in the first half, but in the second half it all kind of fell apart for me, and The Night Circus is kind of the opposite way around. It's very kind of everywhere at the start, but it starts to narrow down towards the end, and I really liked it. So yeah, I would recommend it, but I think it just depends on what kind of fantasy you like, because I know people tend to like one book or the other. So it depends. And that is it. Those are all the books I read throughout winter. It is the first day of spring now. It actually feels like it, which impresses me immensely. Like, subscribe. My blog will be linked below, where I write reviews for all my books I've been reading. I'll also link Instagram and Storygraph. below as well, and I've links to all the books I've mentioned down below as well. And I shall see you next time. Bye.